Nice to see you.
All right. Welcome to Creation in Crisis, a series of monthly webinars with both a spiritual and activist leaders to strengthen our response to the present crisis in creation. Month by month, we are building our connection to the matrix of consciousness, rising from the people of the planet, rising to create a more loving, just, and sustainable Earth community. Our hosts today are myself, I am Gail Ransom, Bob Eisenberger, who focuses mostly on our technology, and Penny Andrews, who has often been a presenter on this program herself. The work we're doing here is spiritual, it's subtle, it's crucial, and it's powerful. So let's get to it. We will begin with some videos that Bob has prepared for us to focus us on our work.
Good morning. We're continuing our meditation on the divinity in creation, the sacred in creation, and again to invoke Hildegard of Bingen, parallel to that of Thomas Aquinas. She says, the word, the Logos, is living spirit, all verdant green, all creativity. So everything we bring into the world through our creativity is itself another being in the world, and therefore something verdant and spirit-like and living. She says the word is indivisible from God, and the word manifests in every creature. So she sees every creature as a word of God, as God speaking to us. And that's the same thing as Aquinas saying that revelation comes from nature as well as from the Bible. And she says, this is how the spirit is in the flesh. The word is indivisible from God. So the word of God is not something in a book, it's in the book of nature, and it's everywhere, and it's talking to us, and we have to learn to listen. And that's the discipline in this. We learn to listen to nature as it speaks to us on a daily basis, including its pain and crying out when it is being pillaged. Thank you. We'll see you tomorrow.
Apologies. There we go.
15-ton Jello pool.
My apologies. Hang on a second. System is being very sluggish today. It's not the right video. Again, my apologies. I rebooted the machine just before we started to make sure this wouldn't happen.
Oh, I think we understand. I appreciate it. If it's too hard, we can sing it. We can just sing it ourselves.
Bob, you clicked on that circle. You need to click on the arrow because that circle took you back to the prior video.
Is this the Herman Greene piece that we're doing?
You're welcome. This is a, yes, we have preliminary time of community and inspiration before we introduce Herman, who will begin speaking around 4:15 Eastern
Thank you.
time.
Okay.
We're a group from Creation Spirituality, which is a sister thread, sister path to Deep Time Network and what Herman is doing. There we go.
Ancient Mother, I hear you calling. Ancient Mother, I hear your song. Ancient Mother, I hear your laughter. Ancient Mother, I taste your tears. Ancient Mother, I hear you calling. Ancient Mother, I hear your song. Ancient Mother, I hear your laughter. Ancient Mother, I taste your tears. Ancient Mother, I hear you calling. Ancient Mother, I hear your song. Ancient Mother, I hear your laughter. Ancient Mother, I taste your tears. Ancient Mother, I hear you calling. Ancient Mother, I hear your song. Ancient Mother, I hear your laughter. Ancient Mother, I taste your
Today's theme is environment and law, earth jurisprudence, rights of nature, earth law, ecocentric law. It has many names, and each of them seeks to re-envision and rethink the human community within the larger community of life and life systems. This is our subject for today, and how to care for that ancient mother of ours. To do this, we would like to begin with a little bit of a community building. We invite you to speak or to write something in the chat, or you might want to raise your hand. If you know how to do that, it's in the bottom tray of your Zoom frame, and you raise your hand, and Bob is going to invite you to speak. And Penny is going to watch the chat to see if there's anything on the chat that might be added to our conversation. Bob, do you want to tell people where to find the hand?
Sure thing. If you're looking for if you look at the Zoom toolbar, which generally it would be at the bottom of your screen, the far left corner is where your mute button is. You might be familiar with that. If you look all the way to the right end of that toolbar, you'll see a button called Reactions. And when you click on that, one of the choices will be raising your hand. And if you do that, it'll help make sure that we see you in order to call on you.
Why doesn't everybody just try that once? So we'll see all the hands go up, perhaps. Just give it a little try there. See if you can make that hand rise. Ah, that's good. Okay, good. All right, wonderful.
So if you want to put yourself back in gallery view so we can all see everybody that fits on screen at one time, you can do that. And I'll be watching for those who want to introduce themselves.
Penny, do you want to say anything about where to find the chat?
The chat will be over to the side. I typed in a message already. Good afternoon or good morning to you. That's a shout out to Margie, who's joining us from Australia, where it's 6 a.m. tomorrow.
If you don't see the chat box on the right of your screen, you might want to click, there's a chat button at the very, again, on the toolbar at the bottom of your screen that would then open that up.
Okay. So what I'd like you to do is to take a kind of stock of where your heart is right now. Spiritual transformation starts at the heart, what we care about. And the phrase we're going to start with is, there ought to be a law. I know inside your own heart, you have something particular that you would like to see changed or prevented completely if you could. And if you say the same thing as somebody else, that's just fine. That just gives more power to that particular concern. And I invite you to unmute yourself and say something if you'd like, or try the chat or the hand raising. No, right. We're going to raise hands. Bob's going to call on you. Sorry. There ought to be a law. What's on your hearts?
So Emiliano still has his hand up. I don't know if you're ready, wanting to speak, or if that's just a, a leftover. Hey.
Must be leftover.
Yep, I think so.
You're on mute, Emiliano.
There it is. I said there ought to be a law in the world to guarantee everybody safe and clean drinking water.
Yeah. In fact, I'm just going to add, why doesn't everybody go off mute so you can say aho or something to that? I really agree with that, and I want to express that. Aho. Oh, okay.
Anthony, yes, you have your hand up.
I think there ought to be a law against measuring the quality of life quantitatively.
Oh. Oh.
There ought to be, Barbara Barrow writes, there ought to be a law eliminating ankle traps.
Mm.
Aho.
Oh,
Oh.
Oh,
Mhm.
Linda Hamilton, you have your hand up.
I do? I didn't mean to, but.
Oh, okay, you can click it again. It'll take it away. Not a problem. Sylvia, yes.
There ought to be a law against pesticides.
Aho.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wanda from Pittsburgh says, my heart is determined to make eco-justice real. Creation needs standing.
Aho.
Oh.
Mhm.
oh.
Mhm.
Linda Knock from North Carolina, there ought to be a law that gives everyone good health care, adequate health care.
Oh. I think Helene had. Helene Guarante?
Yeah, thank you, Helene. There ought to be a law that everyone has enough to eat.
Aho.
Joanne Bloom writes, there ought to be a law against factory farming.
Oh. Who am I missing? It's telling me two people have their hands up and I'm not seeing them.
Penny has her hand up. She hasn't. She doesn't take it down.
Oh,
Penny.
I didn't know I have to. All right, Mel Brooker says there ought to be a law against plastic packaging.
Sorry.
Oh, I know what it was.
Linda, did you have your hand up for real this time?
For real, yes. I think there ought to be a law against colonial-based extraction of minerals.
Oh,
Yes, Sunny.
I think there ought to be a law against super gouging by pharmaceuticals, like maybe a % beyond cost or something, with development costs spread across a long time.
yeah, good. Yeah. Mhm. Betty?
There ought to be a law, and I don't know quite how to phrase it, ought to be a law protecting trees. Maybe the wise use of trees is the way to put it.
Yeah.
Marcia, yes, Marcia Flagg.
There ought to be a law limiting airplane travel.
Yeah.
And there ought to be a law protecting all of the sacred sites in Australia, First Peoples sacred sites.
I would extend that to North America as well.
Yeah. There's some kind of law that needs to be set that companies like Nestle's can't take the water that belongs to all of us as their own and sell it back to us, or minerals out of the ground as if there's theirs for the taking, that there must be some honoring of our common care and ownership of earth materials. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, I would like to take, one more, Sunny?
There ought to be a law against patenting ancient agricultural practices by companies like Monsanto.
So from the wisdom of the meditation through the power of 8, I would like to invite us to spend a minute to take all these things that have been said and imagine them accomplished. Imagine the earth that we have together described and feel the joy of that. I would assume you feel joy about that. Feel the freedom and relish it for a while. It makes it more real and more likely to come to fruition. So let's take a minute. I invite you to return to that feeling whenever you start to get angry and feel defeated, is to remember the picture we've painted together here today. Thank you. Penny?
Well, it's my great privilege to introduce Herman this afternoon. He is a founder and president of the Center for Ecozoic Studies in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, a thought, imagination, dialogue, and action center for an ecological age. He's co-editor and co-author of Earth Law, Emerging Ecocentric Law, a guide for practitioners. He serves on the boards of the Earth Law Center and the International Process Network, and on the advisory boards of the Center for Process Studies and the Institute for the Postmodern Development of China. He's a retired business lawyer and holds a varied a set of graduate degrees in law, theology, and political science. And Gail and I had the good fortune of studying a bit with Herman in the Deep Time Network, where he is an active participant, bringing forward his dedication to the creation of the Ecozoic era. So with that, welcome. Hello, Herman, and we turn it over to you.
Thank you very much. This is the first time I've given this a talk like this in this setting, a kind of spiritual or religious setting. And I invite you to think of the relationship between law and religion. The Jewish tradition has a rich sense of the law, of how it is we are to live on earth. And the Catholic tradition has a rich tradition of canon law. Those traditions of law and customs, in indigenous traditions, there's customs. And historically, there's always been norms of conduct that we need to live by. So I invite you to think about law in a very broad context, not just the positive written laws of you shouldn't do this and you shouldn't do that, but what is it that allows us to live a full life? So I do come to you as a representative of the Earth Law Center and the Center for Ecozoic Studies, and I want to talk to you about a necessary field of law, an emerging field called Earth Law. And to understand Earth Law, you need to understand the universe. Because the universe is a great story. It began 14 billion years ago, and with the Big Bang, the development of the stars and the galaxies and the supernovas, which exploded and gave birth to our low entropy materials and our solar system. And you need to understand the Earth. Here's Earth when it began 4 billion years ago. It's gone through a long evolutionary process. Here's how it looked at the time of the Cambrian explosion 540 million years ago. And this is our beautiful Earth of today. Now, I'm sure that somewhere in your schooling you saw a chart like this of the history of the planet Earth. I just want you to notice something about this chart. These are eons. There's two of them in this geological scheme, the Precambrian and the Phanerozoic. So look at the size of the Precambrian, and then look at the size of our Cenozoic era. Well, the Precambrian was 4 billion years. The Cenozoic is 65 million years. So a better picture of the phases of the Earth is this one, which begins here, and you can see goes all the way around to here until 540 million years ago. So that's the proportion of Earth.
Herman, we don't know when you say here where that is.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought I was pointing with my pointer. Can you see my cursor?
No.
You should be able to see my cursor. Do you see my cursor?
No.
No,
You don't see the cursor over the screen?
No.
we're not doubting that you have one.
Oh, well, gee, I'm really surprised. But so you have the dark red and the kind of purplish and then the blue, all that period before the Cambrian. And that was 540 million years ago. And we have the eukaryotes at the bottom of your screen on the left, which is 2 billion years ago, and multicellular life 700 million years ago. And so it took a very long time to develop the life that we know on Earth. But as well as developing life, Earth developed life systems. For example, the carbon cycle, the nitrogen cycle, the hydrological cycle, the ocean and the wind currents, genetic diversity, soil, microbes. The carbon cycle, we'll be talking a bit about global warming and the emissions by humans. We emit about 39 gigatons a year, but naturally there's 300 gigatons that are emitted each year. And those are all absorbed in the natural carbon cycle. What's different is that humans have overloaded what the cycle can handle. As far as genetic diversity, life is what creates the conditions for life. As you go through that history of the journey of the universe, you see that Earth was barren, and then there were stages in the development of life, and life needed life to develop. So oxygen has been at 20% for the last millions of years, and that's because of life. So we have to have these Earth systems. Sorry, I'm getting a flash flood warning in the background. It'll be over just a minute.
This is a dangerous and life-threatening situation.
Hold on a second.
Do not attempt to travel unless you are fleeing an area subject to flooding or under an evacuation order.
Well, there's a reminder of the Earth right there. It's a flash flood warning. And microbes. The mass of microbes outweighs the mass of all other life forms combined. All life is dependent on them. Even in ourselves, we've come to realize that we're not just a single organism, that we have billions of organisms within ourselves in our microbiome. And after all this richness, Earth developed humans. Hominids a few million years ago, I think I misspelled that. Homo sapiens 250,000 years ago, and that's 6/1000ths of Earth's history. Civilization began 11,500 years ago, and I won't go through all these fractions, you can see them. The Industrial Revolution only 250 years ago. And then the Great Acceleration, which began after World War II. It's also called the Anthropocene. And to get a sense of the scale of the changes that have taken place, this is a picture of carbon emissions since the Industrial Revolution. We often talk about the Industrial Revolution being the time that all these changes started taking place. That was in 1750. But if you look at this graph, and again, I'm really surprised you can't see my cursor, but I'll explain it without my cursor. On the left is 1750, and where you begin to see the yellow getting larger is in the 20th century. And then perhaps you can see the arrow pointing down, that's 1950. And then you see that it really begins to accelerate. So things have really, really changed. And so when you talk about the amount of emissions that have occurred in the period of Industrial Revolution, over half have occurred just since 1990. So the orange portion on the right is the amount of emissions since 1990. So I think what's important to see is that what has been happening is in the Great Acceleration is unprecedented. And it's the reason that people are now talking about the period of the Anthropocene. So carbon dioxide emissions have just reached 420 parts per million. Why haven't we broken through on climate, even in the legal system? Well, Dipesh Chakrabarty in The Climate of History in a Planetary Age, that was just published this year, makes these observations. In the Anthropocene, 3 timescales are coming together. One, the evolution of the physical world, the evolution of life on Earth, and the evolution of humans. So human and natural history can no longer be separated. And he admonishes us to distinguish between the global, which is humanocentric, and the planetary, in which the human is decentered. So when we talk about globalization, we're talking about the economic systems and the communication systems and the transportation systems that humans have devised. So that's globalization. Planetarity is the convergence of the human and the life and the physical. So what we need to do is begin to learn to think on planetary scales. This means understanding the deep past. I don't think you can be an Earth lawyer really without understanding that all that we have depends on this history, this accumulation of phenomenon that makes up our Earth. And the deep present, because our age is, the actual age means a turning point of history. Some of you have heard of the actual age that occurred around the, from 1000 BC through the Common Era, where the major religions came into being and important philosophies came into being and shaped the ethical framework that we've lived out of since then. But now is a turning point at least as large as that, probably larger than that. We're really having to rethink the human place in the Earth in a whole new way. And that also has to do with the deep future. In the past, of course, we might be concerned about our children, but we weren't concerned about the future of the planet. But now we have to live with the concept of the future of the planet. We learn to think on planetary scales. In the Anthropocene, and that means since 1950, humans are affecting changes in the Earth system that in natural cycles would have taken tens of thousands or millions of years. I was just reading yesterday about the Ogallala aquifer that underlies much of the farming systems of the Great Plains. Water comes into the aquifer at the rate of 1 inch per year, but we're drawing it down at feet per year. So we're bringing about changes that takes the Earth a long time to create. We know how to bring about these changes by just doing what we're doing. But we do not know how to fix the consequences of these changes, which will or may last for tens or thousands or millions of years. So it's not enough to just think about our situation today and the challenges that we're facing, or even the deep past. Planetary thinking requires thinking about the future of the planet as well. The difficulty with climate change in our historical framework is that we've always had issues of crime and murder and injustice and poverty and equity. These are ongoing problems, but the issue related to climate change is different because it has a definite deadline. It's not something that can continue. It's something that has to be dealt with. One impulse is to fix the problem with the same approaches that have caused the problem: more technology, more growth, more investment, more industry, and more consumption. At issue is humanity's commitment and principle to securing the life of every human and to ensuring their moral and economic flourishing, regardless of this overall size of the human population and its implications for the biosphere. That's what Chakrabarty said. I would add to this, regardless of the amount of extraction, production, consumption, and disposal by humans. This will not work. We will need to learn to live within limits. And because of this, ecological concerns will sometimes seem to run counter to human justice concerns. We cannot substitute human capital for natural capital on a very large scale. For example, genetic modification can't take the place of the biodiversity on Earth. And the biodiversity is this intricate system which sustains life on Earth. We can't substitute, for example, carbon capture and storage for the carbon cycle. On that last one, we emit at present, humans emit at present 167 million tons of CO2 a day. Sequestering just 15% of this amount would surpass the total, the amount in terms of weight of all the oil extracted each year. And that's a lot, 100 million barrels a day. It's unlikely that humanity will get out ahead of these problems. We will experience shocks, and each of these shocks will present opportunities. The shocks have already begun. I was just reading yesterday about Miami is considering building a 20-foot seawall. The answers will come from the Earth system. Earth is a complex and wonderful system developed over billions of years, and humans must become coherent with its processes. Humans need to accept that they are, in the words of Chakrabarty, not the point of culmination of the planet's story. We must place the current constellation of environmental crises in the larger context of the deeper history of natural reproductive life on this planet. This turns us to our discussion of planetarity, and in our case, to the discussion of planetarity and law. The title of this lecture is Earth Law, Emerging Ecocentric Law. Perhaps planetarity is a better word. It seems less romantic or trendy. Whether we use planetarity or ecocentric or even cosmocentric, it decenters the anthropos, it decenters the human. The preservation of Earth and its life and life systems take precedence, even for the sake of the survival of the human community. So what is Earth law? Well, there's a saying that a picture is worth 1,000 years, 1,000 words, 1,000 years, 1,000 words. And this is the cover art on our textbook, so I'll leave you with this picture for a moment. Earth law is law for the Anthropocene. Now, I have some slides that you'll probably get copies of these slides about the Anthropocene, but I won't go over this. We've already talked about it a bit. So what is Earth law in relation to environmental law? Well, remember that environmental law was, the major environmental legislation was passed in the 1970s. If you go back to the chart of the emissions, remember where emissions were in 1970? And then where they went in 1990 and where they went beyond then. So environmental law was not written in the context of the understanding of the Anthropocene. It wasn't conceived to deal with the negative, it was conceived to deal with the negative side effects of industrial development, so as to promote that development by making it safer for humans. In other words, the great successes of the industrial period were being reaped at that time, and the environmental law was to support the further development of the human community. The primary tools of environmental law are permitting what? Permitting how much pollution you can emit. It's concerned with environmental remediation. In other words, you do something and then problems arise, there's negative consequences, so you fix the negative consequences. There's some protection of biodiversity and some conservation of resources. Earth law is a departure from environmental law and a new context for its extension. Now, this is really appropriate for this group, I guess, ontology of law. Not many legal lectures will talk about the ontology of law. Environmental law is based on the historical ontology of separation between humans and nature. Earth law is based on an ontology, or a simpler word is orientation, of connection, entanglement, and mutuality. Viability or flourishing of life on Earth takes priority over property rights, human rights, and even contract in Earth law. That doesn't mean it does away with those, but the priority is on sustaining the flourishing of life on Earth. And it must be embedded in constitutions of states, whether through amendment or judicial decisions. The working definition of Earth law is an emerging body of law for protecting, restoring, and stabilizing the functional interdependency of Earth's life and life support systems at the local, bioregional, national, and global scales. There's appropriate activities at each level. Earth law may be expressed in constitutional, statutory, common law, and customary law, as well as in treaties and other agreements, both public and private. So going back again to customary law, not everything needs to be written. Earth law also concerns the ways that we develop in terms of our the way we conduct ourselves. There's a saying that when love fails, there's morality. When morality fails, there's law. Well, that is true, but law has to be largely self-enforcing and has to be enforced through the moral conduct of people. So this development of a customary law with social sanctions, but not necessarily legal sanctions, is part of the development of Earth law. So the objectives of Earth law is to provide the legal framework needed so that humans live within planetary boundaries. So that's a big concept because our current industrial civilization doesn't assume that there are such boundaries. It prospectively cares for ecosystems. So along with remediation where needed, it anticipates what the ecosystems need and has laws to anticipate what is needed for the flourishing. Preserves biodiversity, restores damaged ecosystems and loss of biodiversity, protects human environmental rights. So we not only have the rights of free speech and gathering and other kinds of human rights, but humans have a right to a healthy environment. And it justly shares the burdens of mitigating and adapting to climate change and other environmental stresses. A distinctive feature of Earth law is that nature is taken into consideration in its own right, and the benefits, protections, and the remedies afforded by law are extended to nature in its own right. So you've already heard the concept of the rights of nature. Earth law is not the same as the rights of nature. That's one approach. But there are cases that have been argued, and some have been won in different jurisdictions, on the rights of a river. So the rights of a river, if we think of Earth as an organism, as a functioning set of systems, then the river performs certain functions within that system. So apart from any kind of monetary damage that humans might have suffered by being deprived, say, of water rights or flooding or other things that would cause damage, then in Earth law, the river itself could be the subject of a court case to make sure that the river continues to fulfill its functions. And in the context of this group, creation spirituality and also indigenous spirituality, there's a sense of the spirit of the river. And that may not sound too strange for this group, but let's pause for a moment on that. Why do we go and sit by the river? Why do we go and sit by the river? We feel the spirit of the river. So in our textbook, we compiled the leading approaches to Earth law and the issues that must be addressed. In our first part of our book, we dealt with the emergence of Earth law, which is modern environmental law came into being and was very important, very important. I mean, there were rivers that were catching fire. I know many of you remember the Cuyahoga River catching fire. So those laws were very important, but they were based on an old ontology, an old understanding. And so in the Anthropocene, and this is really developed in the 21st century, in a way, it's a recovery of something that was part of indigenous traditions or other ancient cultures. I mean, again, I talked to the Jewish. You can go through the Jewish scriptures and see many things that have to do with ecological care. But the new iteration of that came into being as that turning point had been reached. You remember, again, that chart of emissions, that in 1990, it was very steep. So there was a need to rethink all that. And so we have that part, and then we have a part on addressing the threshold challenges. Someone in the discussion we had earlier was talking about standing for nature. So this is a major thing. Some of you have heard of the case concerning the rights of trees, which was not successfully argued, but there was an important dissent that became quite a bit discussed. And there's been many cases in the United States since then. But apart from laws that give specific rights, say, to humane care of animals, nature does not have standing in courts. So that's a big issue. Property, nature, like slaves, like women, is treated as property of their owners. And if you own a piece of land, you own all the nature on it. You can do with the nature on it whatever you want to. So we have to deal with the concept of property. And then there's the issue of the guardianship of nature. So if nature is going to have standing in court, it can't come and speak for itself. There has to be someone that comes in and speaks for nature. So how would that be decided? Would it be the Federalist Society? Would it be the Sierra Club? Would it be indigenous people? Would it be ecologists? Would it be a portion of the government that represents nature? So this issue of guardianship is an important issue in Earth law. Then our book goes on to litigation strategies. These are some of the major themes of where this is being worked out. One is the public trust doctrine, which is the idea that a fundamental obligation of every country, every government, is to maintain the resource base of that of the people. And this actually goes back a couple of thousand years, but it's being expanded, or we're trying to expand it. One of the cases that you may have heard of is the young people in Oregon who have been arguing that they need to be protected from climate change. And they're making that argument on the basis of the public trust doctrine. It's a fundamental obligation of government to maintain the habitability of our planet. Rights of future generations, the people of the future don't have a voice, and they don't have standing. So part of the new consciousness, part of the new morality of this period is bringing the people of the future into of all species, the young future generations of all species, into the purview of the legal system. Rights of nature movement, you're probably somewhat familiar with. This is a very large and very significant part of Earth law. Human rights and rights of nature, sometimes it's spoken of as co-violations, because if you have a healthy environment for humans, you usually have a healthy environment for other species as well. So they're connected. But also just the idea of extending environmental rights to human beings is a edge issue. Ecocide, the idea that that large killing or degradation of nature itself should be a crime, like suicide or genocide. And this particularly comes up today in relation to the Amazon, because the Amazon serves the entire earth. Then we have a section on transforming the law, and one is a new understanding of the sentience of nature and our relationship to it. That's chapter 14. And then there's a section on the global work that's being done, which is quite extensive through the United Nations and other agencies. And then we have a chapter about ecocentric governance, and it's based on the idea that the social contract is not just between humans. The social contract has to extend to other life forms. And so we call for the new ecological social contract. And then our book has a survey of Earth law, of where breakthroughs are occurring. And one that you probably heard of recently was the Netherlands court. Well, for one thing, the Netherlands court applied the public trust doctrine to require the government to do what our young people in Oregon are asking our government to do. And they also recently had a decision that required Royal Dutch Shell to reduce their emissions by 45%. So Earth law is a developing field. And I am going to stop here because I know I've gone the length of time that we allocated to this. I'll stop at this final slide, which is the cover of our book. And for those of you in the room who are lawyers, this is published by the Aspen Course Book Series, which is a very prestigious series. And this is different than any law book that you'll see in law school, because this is not an established body of law. This is a set of ideas of how law might be established. And the way it will be worked out is just the way the civil rights laws were worked out. It'll be worked out in practice with controversies, with bringing in new ideas, with then bringing in new consciousness. And indeed, what you're doing here with creation spirituality is very much a part of bringing into being Earth law. And I was asked to talk a bit about the Earth Charter and maybe about Teilhard de Chardin. And I just say about the Earth Charter that it is an important international document. We have it in our book. And as far as Chardin, what his great contribution is that he saw evolution as the most important theory of our time. And when we think about Earth law, we're not thinking about cosmos of a fixed, settled Earth. We're not even just trying to preserve Earth as it is or as it was. What we're trying to do is develop the sensitivities to deal with the ever-changing nature of Earth. And I'll stop there.
I'm a little speechless. I don't know if anybody else feels that way. I suggest we just take a minute to kind of collect ourselves from having been exposed to such important ideas and aspects of our life today and in the future. Oh, Herman, you've given us so much, and you're able to put it together just in that the chapters as you go. The very organized thinking is much appreciated by me, and I'm sure by many.
I just want to say, I have to say this, that Tony Zell is in the Zoom, and he's a co-editor, and Grant Wilson is present with us. So if you see Grant Wilson on your screen, and I heard that Rochelle Adam was going to be with us. I can't see her on my screen, but the co-authors and co-editors of the book are also present.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you all for being present. And thank you for doing this work. Thank you for stepping up and doing this work. And you have an organization. Herman, do you just want to tell us what your organization in Chapel Hill there does? where people are, I would imagine other people are involved?
Well, I see a question in the chat. I'm going to answer the question in the chat. It's simpler. What's the name of the book? The book is Earth Law, and you can have it for the low price of $267. Feel sorry for the for lawyers. You know, we can maybe give you some parts of it, but law books are very expensive. And I feel for lawyers, it wasn't that way, or it wasn't as bad as it is now. My own center is, there's no real division between what we're talking about here and what my center does. It's based on the work of Thomas Berry, but it's also informed by process relational philosophies and the study of ecology, and then just a variety of ethical and social information. But what we understand is that the ecological issue is the primary issue that we have to deal with as a collectivity. You know, I got a very funny question this morning. I was giving a similar talk to a local service club in Chapel Hill, and someone asked me if dinosaurs had rights, and I thought, oh, I think I know where he's going with this. He's going to say, well, the dinosaurs were killed by nature, so should we really think of nature as benign? And what I would say about that is that it kind of comes back on him, because without dealing with these issues, there are no human rights either. There are no human rights. Nature, if nature collapses, there are no human rights. There are no human rights. So this is the primary concern that we have to deal with. And so we say that our mission is to advance ecology and culture as the organizing principles of society. We live in the period of industrial civilization, where our major decisions are made on the basis of economics, and economics is dependent on industrial development. So how would society function differently if its primary concerns were the flourishing of life on Earth and full human development? So that's what we are emphasizing.
Could I ask a question?
Sure.
I can't get everybody on the full screen for some reason, but I'm in Victoria, British Columbia, Canada. And this was a very, very enlightening talk, and I thank you very much for it. My question is, are you finding anywhere that you're actually using Earth law to achieve decisions? I've spent many years involved with a river in our province, and we continue to have impacts on it. Could you give us any examples of where there's been actual use? I know about environmental law, but this is seems to me, another step forward. Could you tell us a little bit about any successes?
I'm going to turn that over to Grant Wilson. Grant, are you on? Well, Grant's a very busy person, so he probably is not on anymore.
I can chime in, Herman.
Okay.
Grant said he would listen, but probably not participate. Okay. Yeah. But I can certainly share some successes. At Supreme Court levels in India, Colombia, just a couple that come to my mind, there have been decisions that conferred legal standing and personhood, subjectivity in the eyes of the law on rivers. I can say that we, the Earth Law Center, have drafted legislation for the state of Oaxaca, Mexico, to protect a river there. We're currently working with the Nez Perce on a project with the Snake River. So that's a success that's right in, it sounds like your wheelhouse, where rivers are calling to you. And there's been successes as well in terms of establishing rights, again, at the high court level in the Netherlands, to future generations. That the future generations, again, have the most fundamental legal right of being able to appear in court. And as Herman alluded to, again, that requires guardians, and future generations are not yet in existence and in the law and aren't even very well defined. That's just a couple to throw out there, but I welcome you to look at the book, and you can find many more. And if you can't get a hold of it, ask your local library. Library buy books that library users like, and that would get you access.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Can I jump in here?
Yes,
Can I jump
please.
in?
Sure, sure.
I'm also from Canada, BC, and I know there's a river now in Quebec that has the rights of a human, it's called. I'd like to see it to have the rights of the human. It's the Magpie River in the province of Quebec. But I would like to see it change to the rights of a river rather than the rights of a human. They call it having the rights of a human. And I'm curious about, is Earth law a requirement in the study of law? Is that now become kind of a stable, or is it becoming?
Well, the answer is that is no. It's the mission of our group is make Earth law and make Earth lawyers. So, for example, we're teaching a course it's not a credit course this summer, to law students, and we will be teaching others. And now that the book's been published, it just came out this year, we're trying to bring this into law school curriculums. That's a challenge for many reasons. It doesn't fit into the established curriculum. So, and there's a long process that professors have to go through to get a course put into the curriculum. So but on the other side, there's many organizations that are advancing Earth law, and so admitted lawyers are gravitating to these kinds of approaches. Someone asked a question about, is anybody working on the Amazon? Well, yes, a lot of people are working on the Amazon, and it's both indigenous communities who are seeking biocultural rights. And that's a really nice term, because you can't have a culture if you don't have a bio, right? And so their concept of land ownership is different than ours, communal ownership. In Africa, the same kinds of struggles are going on, and there's lots of forest in Africa as well. I don't think it would be at all appropriate to say that this is kind of a magic wand that is going to change things right away. Environmental litigation is still the primary way of confronting these issues. But the task we have is multi-generational. And this is the kind of way that we need to move as a human community. Tony, you want to say something more? I think I cut you off.
Oh, I don't recall.
Okay.
I have a question.
Sure.
I represent a individual creation spirituality community, and as the leader, do you have some suggestions how I might introduce this subject in the context of our community?
The creation spirituality?
I represent a creation spirituality community, a group of people that come together and meet. And for instance, we have a service coming up on the secret life of trees and the sacredness of trees. And we are committed to ecological and the sacred aspect of it. I'm fascinated by this subject, Earth law, and I'm just asking you if you have some suggestions we're, our people aren't lawyers or don't
Well,
like
I mean,
lawyers, but
for
still.
one, if you want us to speak, then we'll be glad to speak to your group. So that's a simple, if we get too many requests, we'd have to turn some down, but we'd be happy to speak with your group. But I also want to point out the things that are happening, like the hidden life of trees and the other understandings that we're having, where we see how integrated the Earth community is, and that there is subjectivity in nature, is itself bringing into being Earth law, because it's bringing into being the natural world as subjects, as persons, not persons in the sense of humans, but as persons.
Okay, so leaders, I can get his address, y'all, easily?
Sure.
Okay.
Maybe Herman or Tony, you might put in the chat if there's a way for them to
Sure.
contact your organization in case they want to ask.
We'll just put in our individual emails, and you can contact us.
Okay, if that doesn't work,
We
Marcia.
represent two organizations, and we're both involved in both of them. One's the Center for Ecozoic Studies, and the other is the Earth Law Center.
Okay, good.
We also have retired judges and retired lawyers in our community, which I might be able to solicit their interest. I'm in the Bay Area.
They're great because I'm one of them. And I have the great rates too. So back in the 1990s, I was did a one-year program with the American Express. It was kind of a break year from practicing law, and it was on aging. And it talked about the third age that, in the past you had, growing up and your work life and reproductive age, and then a few had a longer period of life. But today, most people live past 65 and have 20 years ahead. And we need to make that part of life productive. And we're very well equipped. I mean, we have a lifetime of experience. So we really need those volunteers. And please, if you know someone who's interested in working on this.
I'll recruit. Are you kidding? Yeah. And as you know, Matthew Fox says, we don't retire, we refire.
I know Matthew also, and I remember him talking about that refirement.
All these folks are refired folks.
Exactly.
Okay, so I'll get your email address somehow, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. I'll put it in.
It's in the chat,
Tony,
Marcia.
I don't know if you want to put your email in or not.
I am doing that.
Yeah. Okay. Other people.
There's a comment that from Margie, Joanna Macy's Council of All Beings gives non-human community an opportunity to speak. Humans are required to role reverse with the animal they've chosen.
Yeah, so one exercise that you can do, it's described in Bruno Latour's book on Facing Gaia, I think it is, but I can send it to, is take some issue and then have people represent different species and systems in nature and have a conversation between multiple species about how to handle a public issue. That would be getting at Earth law. It's beyond just kind of empathizing with the species. It's really aimed at their role as advocates in the system for their own rights and their own place in the system.
Herman, I'm thinking that the millennials or the Greta Thunberg generation that is so aware would just hear what you're talking about and think, well, why isn't it already in place? Why isn't it there? So who's reaching out to that generation that's maybe too young for law school, but who with their hearts and their votes could move this idea fast?
Well, there's two answers to that. One is we're very thankful for the young people, and they've been so important in moving things along in the last few years. And then I don't know, is
I'm
Misty,
sorry.
Somebody mute themselves, please, if your phone is ringing.
is Missy Lauren on? Okay, see, I'm taking roll of all the people who said they were going to be on who aren't. Missy Lauren just developed a curriculum for middle schoolers because people feel the weight of needing to do this, but no one generation is responsible for accomplishing this. So we need multiple approaches, and environmental remediation is one, ecological restoration, teaching about ecology, the sentience of animals, and then we need public policy approaches. The difference of what we're doing here and say environmental law, which I already covered, is that we're thinking of Earth as an organism in which we all are related, in which we all exist, and trying to develop a set of concepts for social change based on Earth as a community.
Herman, I'm curious. I really appreciate your framing this whole issue as emerging environmental law or ecocentric law. Oh, sorry. And you mentioned speaking to groups, even though you're not formally in courses, course curricula yet with this kind of material. But when you do speak to people who are studying law and who are oriented towards, what they've known all their life and what they've been taught in the existing curricula, what kind of reactions do you get? What kind of responses back to you? Is there openness and receptivity, or are there barriers we need to work on?
Well, I'm going to turn that back to Tony. And Tony, tell the two stories you've been telling about reactions to the program that we are putting together. I mean, there's more than two, but you've been telling a couple of stories.
Yeah.
I hope Tony, did you hear what I said? Tony, he asked,
you're on mute, Tony. You're just on mute. That's all.
he asked for what's been the reaction, and I was just asking you to share some of the reactions that you've gotten. You can see the dog is quite excited about it. He's really in favor of this.
This is it. This is nature at its, or for human and non-human animal relationships at its challenging. Right. Goodness gracious.
Tony, you want to say the reactions that you've gotten to the?
Yeah. So, yeah, as I mentioned to an earlier group, one of the most encouraging comments was from a contemporary of mine, a lawyer who has practiced 40 plus years, who said he has not been so engaged in reading anything since he was in high school and read the Federalist Papers. And again, it's extraordinarily encouraging to hear things like that. And some of the reviewers, the critical reviewers on the book, peer reviewers, generally it was, this is something that is needed right now and should be, as someone alluded to earlier, required in every law school. And one of our objectives, of course, is to achieve that. I will say that for anyone who is interested or may know someone interested, beginning on June 21st, for 6 weeks through the end of July, 2 mornings and mornings Eastern time, earlier mornings West Coast time, we're putting on a pilot course. And it's as much for developing the coursework and the pedagogy as it is for transmitting the substantive material. We want to learn how to teach this. And one of the primary objectives is to teach the students how to teach it. Teaching is such a critical aspect of lawyering, whether you're teaching a judge or a jury or an opposing counsel or the opposing counsel's client. Obviously, there's great resistance to learning in these contexts. But with the pedagogy is as important in some respects right now, perhaps more important than the content, which is relatively available. What we don't know is how to teach this.
So Tony, that would be for law students and lawyers, right?
We have a couple undergrads, and honestly, anyone who wants to tune in can.
Okay, all right.
So
I
can.
Tony's opened it up. Yeah.
I can share that link as well. You need.
Okay.
I will not read or grade any papers for you or anyone else. That's not part of the. That doesn't come with the course. But then again, it doesn't cost anything.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Breathtaking hope. I'm thinking about how we are participating in this, if you ask from a creation spirituality point of view, to listen and to own, receive, and honor what you've taught us and told us today, so that it becomes part of our concept of creation and our relationship to nature. And that we believe, as we put these creation and crisis sessions together, that we are building this matrix of consciousness, so that to spend some time thinking of nature's rights, or to spend some of your prayer time, your meditation time, opening up to the connection we have all between all aspects of nature and all participants in nature, the community of life, rethinking the way we belong to this planet, is a way for us to change the consciousness of all human beings. Many traditions say it takes 1 out of 10, and that's doable. We have something else to give us a sense of hope. First, I'd like to let you know that we are not meeting in July. Canada Day and 4th of July are going to kind of take everybody's attention, so we understand that. And so August 5th will be our next meeting, the first Thursday in August. And we will continue building our consciousness and awareness and our spiritual connectings and underpinnings to the kind of work that Herman and Tony are doing. Thank you both and all, and thank you, Penny and Bob. And Bob has put together a video for us to end our meeting today with a sense of being part of something larger than ourselves.
Here are the two faces of this world, the Black people, right? And I'm not talking about African Americans, I'm talking about our security people dressed in black everywhere in the world now, dressed in the same equipment made by the same companies and the same techniques. And look at the faces of the people on the left. Look at that child, right? Looking at that. What does she think, right? And this is Japan, thank you. And this is our Julia in Ecuador with the uwa, right? Trying to speak truth to power. And again, in Narmada, right? Has anybody ever locked down? Do you know how vulnerable you feel when you're locked down? I mean, you can't even pee, for example, but I mean, you feel so vulnerable. This is an act of enormous courage, you know? And these are the people who've been redlined since World War II, if not earlier, right? Beginning to do what shouldn't have happened to clean up the messes has been caused by our financial institutions and the women who are stopping corporations from building golf courses on the cemeteries and the graveyards of their ancestors. So this is what this world looks like. It is diverse, it is extraordinary. We have no idea how many of us are out there. These are Simonas who were kidnapped in Baghdad, who have the, right? But they had an NGO, Bridges to Baghdad, that's been working there for 9 years, bringing food and medicine to the women and children who were hurt by our sanctions. This is the UWA presenting, a past due invoice to Occidental Petroleum. And here's Randy, presenting his past due invoice. In Spain, right? In London, here we are in Philadelphia, here we are in Colombia, here we are in Rome, here we are in Prague, here we are in Washington, D.C., and here we are in Ethiopia, and here we are planting trees, and here's the Ija in Nigeria protesting against Chevron, right? And doing what needs to be done, and here we are protesting our imperialism in terms of food, and here is Rainforest Action, again. And here we are saying no to the incarceration of our youth in this state in any place else, right? And yes to alternative power, right? And no to war in Turkey, and no to the Republicans in New York City. And this is a difficult and dangerous thing. This is our sister who we have lost. This is Rachel Corrie, crushed under an Israeli bulldozer. And this is Judy, who we have lost, right? And Caesar, right? But it is a joyous, joyous movement with extraordinary people. Our Nobel Prize winner, right? Dan Chupe from Nicaragua, head of a Campesino movement. Look at this. This is so beautiful, right? And here's Jose Bove, farmers against junk food. Right? The world is not for sale. Beloved Dalai Lama, right? And here, right? So this is us. This is who we are, right? How big is this movement? What you're seeing here is the beginning of a list of the 130,000 minimum organizations in the world who work towards social and environmental justice. And that's the minimum. It may be 250,000 groups. It may be 500,000 groups. Read these names. They're unfamiliar to you, most of them, I'm sure, right? They are. We do not know how big this movement is. It's marked by kinship, and community, and symbiosis. It is Pachamama. It's Mama, right? It's the earth talking back, waking up, What you see is your kin on that screen, And to give you a sense of how big this movement is, if I had started this tape on Friday morning at 9 a.m. when this conference began, and if we sat here all day Friday, all night Friday, all day Saturday, all night Saturday, all day Sunday, all night tonight, and all day Monday, we still would not have seen the names of all the groups in the world who we are. It's so new, we can't recognize it. We're familiar with armies and governments and war and churches and religions, but there's no precedent for what we're doing. What you are creating is completely unknown. It is everywhere. There is no center. There's no one spokesperson. It's in every country and city on earth. It is within every tribe, every race, every culture, and every ethnic group in the world. This is the first time on earth that a powerful, non-ideological movement has arisen. During the span of the 20th century, big ideologies were worshipped like religion. They dominated our beliefs. This is to speed it up so you don't have to stay here until Monday night. But ideologies dominated us: capitalism, socialism, communism, right? In the words of Ed Hunt, ideologies stalked the earth clad in armor, right? They fought for the control of our minds and the lands, and it wasn't pretty. And we were told that salvation would be found in the domination of a single system. This is where salvation will be found. We know that as biologists, we know that as community organizers, we know that as ecologists. It's found in diversity, not in domination. This movement does not seek power. It's misunderstood that way. It seeks to dismantle power. Very, very different.
Well,
It doesn't mean that it's politically inactive. It means this, though, that its overriding agenda is to create a world where the kind of political power we're seeing is criminal, illegal, and unnecessary. It is only visible in its parts occasionally, and when they are seen, they're labeled by the media as environmentalists, anti-corporate, ragtag, marginal, poorly funded, true enough, ex-hippies, liberals, and it's all true, actually. But what's missing from these labels, and which cannot be tagged so easily, is the underlying vision and values and heart, and that is what makes this movement a movement. Because if you ask every one of these groups in the world to write down what informs them, what is it that creates, the passion to do the work that they're doing, and 6, 7, 8, or 9 things, and write it down on a piece of paper. And if you had a room or hall big enough and you put it on the wall and you walked down and you read every one of them, they do not contradict themselves. This is coming up. This is grassroots. This is the real deal. This has never happened in the history on Earth, ever. Here are the two faces of this world, the black people, right? And I'm not talking about African Americans.
A very touching story, and I think that it's a great, the work that you are doing, Herman, is a great compliment and support and outgrowth because of these kinds of movements that they're having to operate at such a grassroots level because the new emerging ecological law system is not yet enacted. So thank you for all that you're doing.
Yeah. Yeah, I was struck by one statement there that if you put all these things up on a wall and you talked about what they were for, there wouldn't be any contradiction. And I feel that way too. We're working about for something in common, a world that we all envision.
His book that addresses those issues, Blessed Unrest, is excellent. It was written about 10 years ago, so 10, 12 years ago. He said that he used the figure of about 4 million people, I believe, within the group. So, I mean, but it was pretty amazing. And then him talking about 130,000 recognized groups, but in the book, he knew there were a lot more. So.
Yeah, and let's insert an update that that they have been able to document much larger numbers, and it could have even been that you were naming. So, yeah.
Right.
That was Paul Hawken at the Bioneers Conference, and I think that was several years ago. So that number may actually be doubled.
Yeah.
But that's part of that
his
consciousness.
second speech on
Pardon?
that. I've seen him before, and it was earlier when there weren't as many movements on the screen. Yeah, it's great.
So that is a crust of the earth, is all these minds and hearts and spirits working towards the same possibility of having a true earth culture, alive and connected and in love with each other. Like that mushroom with all of its roots that goes all the way around. It's bigger than we think. So thank you for joining us today, and thank you for being part of this and your wonderful questions and discussions. And we of course thank Herman so much for his work and his articulation of his work and his willingness to share it with us. So hope we see you in August.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks so much, Herman and Tony, for your good work in the world.
I see so many I know. So many important people.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I can do something.
Hi, Jim. Jim Weagle. Jan McGuire. Jan McGuire. Yeah.
Hi, Betty.
Hi, Jan.
Hi. Okay.
Jan walks in two worlds at least.
Three in this group.
Really, that's so exciting. Wow. Beautiful, beautiful.
Okay.
Hmm.
Thank you
Well,
all.
Thank you so much, Herman.
You're welcome.
Bye.
Thank
Goodbye.
you. Thank you.
See you, Bob and Gail.
See you. I just want to say that was, I turned off my phone and my son-in-law wants to do a FaceTime with me and it comes in and cuts off the whole, starts making, this, it's like driving a Ferrari, this Mac. It's so, excitable. It wants to do everything. I don't know. I may have stopped that film early by trying to close down the chat where I was giving them Paul Hawkins' name.
I don't think so.
But no, go. Oh, good. Oh, that's good.
But you know what? I forgot to play the second video a second time. I'm sorry.
The second video.
At the beginning?
Oh, I think that was good. I think the way you did it was the way I expected it to be, whether I articulated that or not. I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's fine. I thought you wanted a second time.
Oh, no, but
Yeah.
thank you.
Did he said something about we were going to get his slides? Is that the plan?
Wow. I'll have to ask him. He did do that for ANC, didn't he, Penny?
He did say it today, and given that some of these people are very connected to him, I would think he's still willing to do that. So yeah, I think it's doable. He might have mentioned it before when we were on the call as well.
Yeah, I think he did. So you might get some queries about that, Gail. People might thought about that. But if you talk to him and he shares it, I would love to get a copy too.
Yeah, there's some facts in there you just want to have. Well,
Yeah.
I'll ask him, and I can just I'm thinking, as I was thinking, I can take everybody's name and put them in our constant contact, but then I send it to everybody who's ever been at one of our presentations, or else I just take the names and make a big group and send it to them out of the group, send it to everyone.
And do that. Constant Contact also has the ability to create, and it's been a couple of years, so I'm going to lose the term. It'll come to me. But you can create like a tag, and you can send an email just to the people with that tag.
I saw tags, but I decided not to learn what they are. It's like, cute, I didn't go there, but I will go there now. All right. I'll do that.
There are tags. It may not be tags that does what I'm talking about, but if you want big, I can.
Okay.
But
All right. Great.
yeah.
So great to have the option of the video. I think it adds a lot.
Oh, yes.
It's grand.
Yeah,
Grand.
good. I'm glad it worked. I don't know what was going on with those at the beginning, because I was doing the things you need to do. I know Herman seemed to think I was missing something, but my system just was not reacting. I'd click a button and nothing would happen. I'm just like,
Well, that happens to us lay people all the time.
Well,
but I think in the end it worked.
Yeah.
Mercury's in retrograde. That's what I'm told. And so that there are seasons where the energy gets disrupts. There is disruptive energies, and they're invisible, so we can't tell, when something's coming in. But that's my excuse. I always say it's the energies. It's not me.
Good enough.
Great job.
All righty. Well, thanks
to everybody, all of us. Great job.
So we're not doing July. We're not doing July. I'll hear from you about August.
August, yeah. I'm going to call my friend Miguel Segay, who's at Taino Indian, and he's so articulate. So and then we'll try. How do you feel about asking Stephen
Martin?
Yeah.
I think he's delightful. And and that 9 month, he may be up for talking about that 9-month program, which some folks might be into in this group.
We need to know what to do. People want to know what, so that's a thing they can do. Just like letting lawyers know about this book. This is, it's things to do. So do you think you could ask him for September? Would you ask
Stephen
him?
Martin?
Yeah,
of course. I will ask him.
Sorry, what's Stephen's last name?
Martin.
And he is a scientist. He teaches science And I want to say he's a meteorologist, but he's not. but
Astronomer. He's an astronomer.
Okay, right. Much bigger than a meteorologist. Um, so he has he's got a lovely, easy sense about him. And he's got good science, and he is helping to organize these programs with Jennifer Morgan, and they're really, very well done, I think.
Mhm. And I think the style of how they lead, that it should not be missed, the style of how they lead this course, which is different than the usual talk and, the talking, and they leave a lot of time for, consideration. We won't call it contemplation, but at least consideration, but a lot of time for it. It's more it's more multi-focused leadership. It's rather than, one person. And I think it sets up an expectation for the new community and how the new institutions, how we do our work together, how we live together in a different way. And I think they're embodying it.
Yeah, that's great.
That's my, I'd love to hear them talk about that a little bit, how they made those decisions.
Right.
Fantastic.
Yeah. Okay.
Gail, I have a technical question.
Okay.
You renamed yourself.
Yeah.
And that's a pretty long name. And when I tried to put in names, it truncates to something shorter than that.
I think it's only that because we're in the where we have few people online on the group. I think I only got to 3. I think it only showed up Gail Sophia Ransom. So I have to give up something there. This is too much.
Okay.
I could just say Boston.
Sure,
And
that
probably
would
say
that makes
Boston.
sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm liking, yeah. That I didn't, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Penny only gets Drumlin. She gets Drumlin in the and she's done. So.
I bet you get a lot of questions about that because people don't know what drumlins are, right?
Yeah.
Let's talk about that someplace.
Yeah, we talked about it at the last meeting or something.
Bob gave the textbook definition of a drumlin. That was very cool.
Yeah, good. All righty. Well, have a great evening.
Thank you.
Have a great couple of months.
Yeah.
We'll be
have a good summer and national celebration. See if we can reframe that.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
All righty.
Be well.
Okay.
Bye-bye.